Welcome to the S4 stage, Steve.
Thank you.
So we are here to talk about ExxonMobil's open process automation program, and I know a lot of the audience is familiar with it, but probably a good place to start so everyone's on the same page is just, give them a, 3-minute overview on what it is and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Dale. So the program's been going on for a few years, so I'll do my best to condense several years into several minutes. It's going to be a challenge. So the program started, I guess, a while back. ExxonMobil realized we have a significant percentage of refinery and chemical plant control systems that are facing obsolescence. So we had a chief engineer of process control and automation, Don Bartusiak. He led a program back in 2010 related to this area of replacement. And he was challenged by the management of ExxonMobil. And they said, listen, if you're going to go through the trouble to replace all these systems, can you replace them with something that makes us more competitive? And that, I think, was the genesis of this entire program. Now, I got involved in 2012, but I was working on other things. Around 2013, I put together a skunkworks team. I got some very clever people inside ExxonMobil. I got some outside industry consultants. And we focused in on really what are the business problems? And we thought from that we would be able to develop the functional characteristics of a system we want to see, and then after that would follow the form. So we really appreciated the good things about the system. It's reliable, it's deterministic, it does what it's supposed to do, serve the industry very well. But there were things that really bothered us. So some examples. The wholesale replacement cost was just exorbitant. Very expensive. It's sort of like someone coming to your office from the IT organization saying, Dale, here's a new laptop. It's 1,000 times more powerful, but there's a catch. You have to rewrite all your PowerPoints, your Excel spreadsheets, your Word documents from scratch. And they're going to look exactly the same.
Okay.
That's the world we live in. There was the integration of third-party components. That was problematic as well for us. So no one gets a Verizon cell phone plan expecting that they can't talk to someone on the AT&T, T-Mobile, or Sprint network, but that's the nature of proprietary protocols. And then, of course, there's the security side, which is somehow the guys designing systems in the 70s didn't see the internet coming. So we have this sort of bolted-on approach to protect ourselves rather than it being intrinsic, and we think there's an opportunity cost for that. So we needed a vision. We put a vision together around 2014 or so. And this was an open and secure platform, interoperable, portable, extensible, reliable, scalable. And we had some constraints. We said, listen, we want to make sure it's not an ExxonMobil-only project. So it had to be commercially available on the open market, had to be applicable to greenfield and brownfield facilities, and also we didn't want to compromise or lose any of the reliability or determinism we have in today's systems.
Right.
So we took the idea, we took this vision, we shopped it around to the DCS suppliers, and we sort of knew what kind of reaction we'd get. But I can sum it up like this. They said, look, we love everything about open process automation, except the open bit. And we accepted that was that was understandable.
Yeah.
We're challenging a business model that works well, served them well, and it was relatively uncomfortable. So that's the point at which we said, listen, we have to go outside of industry to really affect this change and catalyze a shift in the business model. So we approached Lockheed Martin. And we liked Lockheed for a couple of reasons. One is there's an undeniable connection between control systems and avionics platforms. So, they both have HMIs, both have control surfaces and control valves. And Lockheed had also led this kind of transformation from stovepipe proprietary systems to open interoperable ones, and we thought we could leverage that. So we've really, in the last, just to sum it up, my 3-minute answer, right, is we've been really working on, we want to build a prototype next year, or this year. Sorry, we've been working on that last year, an OPA prototype. In a lab, and we also want to kind of continue this effort of building a coalition of the willing. And that pretty much brings us up to today.
Okay, and so, I think I became aware of it about a year ago when ExxonMobil went public with this and started to bring other people in. So you've been out in the public for about a year. What would you say is your biggest success in that first year?
Yeah, so that's easy. So the OPA forum, the Open Process Automation Forum, is without a doubt our single most important metric and our biggest success. So the Open Group is helping us in this effort. They facilitate the development of standards, so the custodians of the Unix standard and the FACE standard as well. So in just a matter of several months, I mean, I think less than 4 months, we have 37 member companies that have joined. 8 of them are users, 5 are major DCS suppliers, and we're focusing in on, on the pain points. You know, we're finding out that there's a lot in common amongst industry, and we're not just talking about chemical, oil, and gas, but pulp and paper, food and beverage, pharmaceutical,
Right.
minings and metal. We got a lot of interest from broad industries as well as suppliers. And the focus now is, what's the win-win scenario, the business model that everyone feels comfortable with, that there's a pathway to profitability. And before we're putting any pen to paper, the objective is to make sure everyone's comfortable with that. We have a level playing field, and then we'll start to work on the standards.
So I think that's a fair first-year measure, but it's a little bit, we have these efforts in industry like Cyberstorm and Logic and things where they almost from the start they're viewed as successes because people who weren't talking to each other talked to each other, and that was what they were really trying to achieve. And obviously that was important to kick this thing off and create this, but what are you looking at for measures in year 2 or 3, or 4? How do you determine whether this effort has succeeded or not?
Yeah, so I mean, it really ties back into the forum. I think, I mean, look, there could be 100 metrics on this program. I think the single most important one is the reaction of the users, the suppliers, and the systems integrators to the program. I can't tell you, the next set of metrics are still related to that, but to give you an example, we had an industry day for suppliers in January last year in Bethesda, Maryland at the Lockheed Martin facilities, and it was, I think, one of the worst snow days in that area in the year. And everything was snowed in, nearly everything was shut down, and still we had 30 to 40 companies come, 60-some people attend. We've had an industry day for users in Houston. We had 50 attendees there. We've had hundreds of folks dial into our webinars. And of course, the OPA forum and conferences like this and the kind of interaction with other folks. So we're gauging our result and our success based on really the interaction with those key groups.
And you mentioned, I think, a few minutes ago that there was going to be a prototype in a lab at some point. I would think that would be a pretty big milestone.
Very big.
When you actually have components from, will this be components from different manufacturers, different vendors working together to create a DCS of some sort, or does that prototype have any definition around it yet?
Yes, so we've been very specific. We want to test interoperability, portability, reliability, flexibility. We can't test everything. So we sent an RFP out in December that went out to all the suppliers, and we're looking forward to responses in February. And we'll try to start to assemble a system. We'll put wrappers around it to create the interoperability characteristics we want. And Lockheed will lead this effort. And we'll try to get that prototype built and done and test these quality attributes of the open system by the end of this year.
And when you talk about this forum or this OPA forum, are they mainly vendors or have other asset owners come in and put their purchasing power behind this, potential purchasing power behind this effort?
So we have 8 end user companies, manufacturers, that are 8 of the 37. It's not good enough for us. We'd like to roughly triple that number. We'd like to see into the 20s. And we think we'll be successful. I think there's just there's a little bit of a lag in getting all the user companies to join in. There's still some other majors that chemical, oil, and gas integrated that we know are going to join, but they just haven't yet.
So you've been, and I didn't realize this till we talked. You've been at this, for 6 or 7 years now, but 1 year public and more people involved. What have you learned? What went maybe differently that you planned, that you had to adjust your approach or your plan in the last year or so? Or has it all been perfect?
The challenges in this area are partly technical, but a big chunk of it is commercial. And that's very different than a traditional, breakthrough R&D program where there's usually something very complicated on the table that's technically related. I think in terms of learnings, it's been a real eye-opening. This isn't a eureka moment, but over the course of time, we sort of learned that everything that we want to do has already been done. Most of it's been done by adjacent industries. So you take a look at telecom, for example. I'm guessing that they got very tired of getting guys in pickup trucks to drive out to the cell phone towers and change out the accelerators and the switches and whatnot. And they said, look, we need to start virtualizing some of this technology. But it has to be real time, it has to be highly available. And it turns out there are commercially available solutions today for virtualization of those components, plus the software-defined networking, that have the same availability requirements as an industrial control system, albeit for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But we don't care. Like 5 nines availability is 5 nines. It's really, it's surprising to see that. The IT industry as well, all the sort of hardware root of trust concepts where you have the encryption key embedded in the microprocessor and authenticates the boot and then the operating system and the application and the device itself, and intrusion detection and prevention systems, all these things are all out there. And the FACE standard, the one used by the avionics industry, defense industry, for building these open interoperable environments for avionics platforms for the Department of Defense. So we just, it's really, it's very welcome to see that all the technology and solutions are out there already. We just have to be very careful in picking and choosing and integrating.
Well, you've probably thought of some of the hard questions and probably had to talk about them internally a lot as to what might cause this program to fail. And I think one of the obvious ones that comes up is the idea that if I'm a vendor right now, let's say a DCS vendor selling to a large company, whether it's yours or someone else, and I have the whole project, and it's very difficult to move away from me. The things that you were explaining at the beginning that as a customer are not your ideals are actually very positives oftentimes for the vendor, right? They have customer lock-in for decades. They have a huge advantage in any next rollout. Why would, I guess, what's your strategy, or why would a large DCS vendor want to have this program succeed?
We get asked that question a lot, not just externally, but internally.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, all of the time. So the way we approach this, we take this very seriously, and we accept that this is really the first port of call in the OPA forum. We have to define that business model that everyone believes gives them a path to a slice of the pie to succeed. And the conversations we have in the OPA forum are sort of, they're like this. Look, we'll all agree that there's a lot of non-productive cost in the system that we have to take out. The cost of wholesale replacement, of integrating third-party components because of the proprietary protocols. And those costs can be saved by the supplier and then passed on to the user. We also ask some other hard questions. For example, why would a supplier want to build every single component in the system? I mean, why not just build the components you're good at building? Why not look at your resources and capabilities and focus those on building the things that provide your shareholders with a high profit margin? And of course, that improves your profitability. And there's another sort of argument we talk about that was kind of popular when we had our meeting in San Francisco with the forum, which was there's an argument that the pie is going to grow. So we talk often about this services business that's starting to expand and emerge. Mm-hmm. And like today we say it's in the context of big data analytics and condition monitoring, equipment support, health, things like that. We don't know what it will be, but something is going to come out of this openness and this connectivity. And there's an opportunity to gain more revenue through those sorts of new industries that emerge. And those that are on the leading edge are going to be able to capitalize on that. I think, in summary, wherever the users want to go, the suppliers, they will eventually follow. I mean, the invisible hand of Adam Smith is still very much here. And the users will really, I think, drive this future.
Well, they certainly, I mean, it's going to have to happen that way, right? It won't happen if the vendors don't see that they're going to have to make this change to make a lot of money. But one of the things that, when you talk about this idea of getting rid of the non-productive part of what you do, the part, a vendor getting rid of what helps them focus on what makes them money, get rid of the others, and let someone else make money in that area. It makes a lot of sense. The only thing is, in the DCS world today, and maybe this is going to change, but in the DCS world, a lot of these projects are very semi-custom projects. You know, there's a tremendous amount of services just to get everything to connect together and work. And a lot of times the companies are organized, the vendors are organized around providing that type of overall project, as opposed to, I mean, in theory they're buying a product, but really they're buying a project to run a plant or a refinery or something. I mean, that, to me, that would be a pretty different business model than for a DCS vendor if they really are getting in the business of selling equipment. Have they talked to you at all about that, or have you gotten any feedback from, especially from the large players? I can see the small players loving this, but the large players, I would say, this would really change their life if you were successful in doing this.
A huge business model change. So, you know, I don't know the percentage of components with say a main automation contractor that comes and works for an EPC in a greenfield facility. I don't know what percentage of equipment actually comes from that contractor. Maybe it's half. Maybe the other bits are PLCs and third-party equipment, analyzers and sensors and actuators and valves. But we're really talking about moving that boundary from whatever it is, 50, 40%, to a much smaller number. But the responsibility for integration and the accountability still stays the same. There'll still be one individual entity that's still responsible for procuring the right equipment, making sure that it operates together when they build the system, and also the ongoing support as well. You need an entity to do that.
Okay, so yeah, that was one of the other things that you know, in talking to people, I've heard some concerns is today ExxonMobil and other large global asset owners have pretty stringent support requirements on these large vendors that have dominated their installations over the years, over the decades. You know, being able to provide people and answers for everything in the system at any time, anywhere in the world. I mean, it's, if you actually read these support contracts, they are quite rigorous. I mean, and for good reason, that you need that kind of support. So now you buy this component from this, you buy your HMI here, you buy your PLC here, you buy your OPC server here. How do you get that support?
Right.
I mean, how do you get people not saying when it doesn't work, well, you need to call him, you need to call them?
Yeah, this is one of the most, that's probably the single most common question that I get. And well, I can tell you our position now is this is really, we think the answer is centered around accountability and contractual obligation. So you do need a single throat to choke, single point of contact. Someone has to be accountable for the overall performance of the system. It gets tricky because the core components of the system that ensure a stable operation of the plant are the HMI, the controller, and the I/O. And to your point, if we break those up and procure those from separate sources, you've introduced another twist. So we think the right answer to mitigate that concern and that risk is very crisp and well-defined standards, number one, right, for interoperability. Number two, that's not good enough. You will also need sort of an independent and comprehensive verification and for conformance method. So if that product ends up on the marketplace in the OPA repository as OPA conformant, that it's truly conformant. And the other thing we've been thinking about is there's probably a need for more comprehensive test harness technology to work out the bugs earlier and minimize the surprises. It's probably, you know, maybe the best, maybe that's the best answer I can give you right now, because it is quite a concern and it's a new area we're delving into. But it's not that much different than what's happening in the avionics space, the commercial and military space, where you're mixing and matching hundreds of components from different suppliers, yet there's one key systems integrator that's responsible for putting them together and ensuring that they all work in harmony.
Yeah, because a lot of what you were describing there were efforts to reduce the support burden, right? If it, you know, better testing, clear interfaces, things like that should reduce the number of support calls that you have. But if things break, I mean, things are not perfect, you're going to need that support.
Yeah.
So do you see, like, this, is this going to be a new market where there's going to be someone that's just responsible for support for the next, you know, 10 years on this system? Or do you think this is whoever is the prime vendor or this integrator you talk about? How do you see that market playing out? Obviously, what will happen, but do you have any vision for that right now?
Well, the model that works today, I would imagine, is probably the template we'll work off of. So the systems integrator might be a DCS supplier. They just may not give you all of their homegrown kit. And it's likely that if you're the systems integrator, you understand much about the system. You'll have a great competitive advantage to carry on with the ongoing support, the model we use today. And that's probably that would be my best guess right now. Now, who enters the market? Clearly, we have, 5, 7 major DCS suppliers. There'll be key candidates to be systems integrators, open systems integrators, and then there'll be some new entrants coming in. We have, the interest in the defense space as well. The complex systems integrators like Lockheed Martin. There's also Boeing and Northrop Grumman and the others that would be candidates to enter the market if they see value there.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but it almost goes back to that business model we were talking about for a DCS vendor. The DCS vendor could say, I'm going to really focus on my product and not worry about all this installation. Or they could go the other way. They could say, yeah, we'll offer a little product, but we're really going to try to make our money being this entity that connects all these open systems together and maintains them. That'll be interesting to watch. On the 37 companies and the others that haven't joined but have expressed interest, are there many new players, people that haven't been able to get into potentially selling to a company like ExxonMobil that have said, I can develop a part of this solution that I wasn't part of before? Not only new to ExxonMobil, but let's say even new to the whole industry, new people coming in.
Yeah, so it reminds me of two things. So one of the things Lockheed Martin told us about their move from stovepipe proprietary to open was that they had this great concern that they were going to have their competitors bidding to replace their own components. But at the same time, they realized now they have an opportunity to sell components into other markets they were shut out of. So the DCS suppliers, I hope, look at it that way. But there are a lot of suppliers that are coming in saying, look, we've been previously completely shut out of this market. And we'd very much like to have an opportunity to sell. Chip manufacturers have mentioned to us that, I might make this almost a nearly identical chip for 3 or 4 different customers. It's almost identical, but slightly different. And if I could just standardize on one single chip, I could save a ridiculous amount of money and pass that on to you and pass that on to the users as well. So it's kind of it's a mixed bag, but there are a lot of new entrants that really want an opportunity to play in an open marketplace where they can compete.
So this is interesting. So if you have all these new components from potentially new vendors and probably in the perfect world improving their product year after year, so let's say 3 to 5 years from now you have a much better component of the system than was available 5 years before. Do you see ExxonMobil or other people that are involved, do you see the model that they'll be upgrading their systems or looking to upgrade every 3 to 5 years parts of it, or do you still see you take this open solution, put it in, and then 15 years later or 20 years later you put in a new open system? Which model do you see?
So here's the vision. I don't know if we'll get there, but
Okay.
the vision is this, an abstraction of the hardware and the software. So that when I write my application code to do something, the physical kit in the field stays the same. Why wouldn't my controls stay the same? So we don't want to touch, we want to write and set and forget the process controls. The underlying hardware, we only want to change under 2 conditions. Either the hardware itself is obsolete, or maybe the idea I have for a new application requires more memory, more compute power, something that allows me to extract some more value, a positive NPV opportunity. And our hope, and this is really the stretch goal, is that not only is the software open, but the hardware interfaces are open. So the pin configuration is standardized for a particular controller design, so that the comms, the power, can allow us to interchange the hardware. So I might replace the hardware as a routine maintenance activity, but they take a checkpoint or a copy of the software and just download it to the new system without any modification. So, commodity businesses, they have a philosophy and a strategy that believe the low-cost supplier wins. So, of course, we're going to hold on to our kit and minimize the capital investment for as long as we can. That might change depending on different industries. The upstream organizations may say, I just set it and forget it. Maybe the downstream, where you have a lot of degrees of freedom of optimization, might say, I would like more processing power to make more money. I want to spend more to make more.
That seems, though, wouldn't that, so right now, ExxonMobil is a little unique in the degree that you standardize your deployments, right? Not all companies try to do this, or most companies try to do this, but Exxon really, it's very important that this is like this, for support and all other reasons. If you have this open system where you're putting one in now and then you're putting another one in 3 years and you decide to pick the best thing there and the best thing in 6 years, you're introducing probably a variability that is very unusual to your company. Do you see setting a standard for 10 years, or do you actually see changing that philosophy?
So, yeah, back to this point, the process control code,
Right.
the configurations, we want to remain static, only change them if we need to. The underlying hardware, we're happy to change it out if there's a reason to. You know, that comment about standardization, commonality is valuable.
Oh, yes.
And you know, you see, like Southwest will claim that's one of the core reasons why they're continuously profitable over the decades, is that, you know, they're sticking with the 737. And so in our world, what does that mean? You have commonality. We are very good at it, and you end up having advantages like application reuse. You write once and deploy to many, but you know that comes at a cost, and the cost is related to marketplace competition, things like pricing and vendor responsiveness and innovation. But if you have a heterogeneous fleet, you know, the other extreme. You do get the marketplace competition advantages, but you don't get the application reuse. So at those two extremes on that spectrum have different advantages and disadvantages. But the OPA framework is designed to allow you to have that mixed fleet, but to be able to create a common software operating environment so you get the advantages of application reuse. And you can drop the same application in every plant regardless of the underlying platform. So the portability and operability that comes with OPA could give both parties, you know, both extremes, and a real advantage.
And introduce some interesting support things as well, then, right? Because you would have consistent support at one level and very different support, you know, at the infrastructure or the non-application level.
Could very well be.
Yeah. I just had, we're almost out of time here, but I just had one more question. You know, as I was thinking about this, I was saying, well, this is really interesting. You're taking the existing DCS and saying, how can we do better with this? Have you thought, or are you concerned about the fact that 3 to 5 years from now, it may look completely different if a lot of this becomes cloud services, and that or what is your strategy to not be building a much better obsolete system? You know, how are you going to deal with those kind of changes that some are predicting, some are saying will never happen? But have you looked at that future possibility?
Yeah. So this is the hardest question you've asked. So there's an old Danish proverb that says, "Be careful about making predictions, especially about the future." So we try to subscribe to that, and the OPA forum. We try to develop a very forward-thinking strategy and approach because we just don't know what the future will hold. So we're very careful not to specify a network architecture, a topology. We're not specifying hardware. We're not specifying application software. We're only requiring public APIs, publicly available APIs, communication protocols, and data models. Everything that we can do to avoid blocking our kick into the future, and that's probably the best we can do right now. We have a lot of smart minds from a lot of different industries making sure that we don't do anything that boxes us into a corner. Now, everyone is welcome to join the OPA forum, and if anyone has ideas, you know, the open group hosts this, and we'd be more than happy to have help answering that question.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate your time, and I think it's, I didn't say it at the beginning, but this project is part of ExxonMobil's breakthrough group, which means it's recognized as a radical solution, right? It's not just an evolution, it's a jump, and it's not an easy thing to do, and I think it's great that companies like yours are trying these difficult things, and we'll be watching it. So thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.